I was all set to come on this show, Karen, and in the absence of any real standout matches, or at least matches that I was especially excited about on the Nagoya card, I was going to maybe just ask you to tell the listeners a little bit about Nagoya, maybe postulate some theories as to what they had done to deserve such a flat new beginning card in comparison to the ones in Osaka and Sapporo. But of course, all of that went out the window on Thursday night when news broke that Kazuchika Okada will be imminently leaving New Japan Pro Wrestling. The official New Japan statement, as posted by their website, Kazuchika Okada will be leaving New Japan Pro Wrestling after the conclusion of his contract on January the 31st, 2024. We apologize to fans for the abrupt nature of this announcement, but join them in wishing Okada the very best in his future. As the New Beginning series this weekend, Okada will appear on February dates on February 11th in Osaka and February 23rd and 24th in Sapporo. Changes will be made to forthcoming cards with an announcement to follow. We appreciate your understanding and continued support. Kazuchika Okada's statement: I have nothing but gratitude for having been a part of New Japan Pro Wrestling since 2007 and for New Japan Pro Wrestling bringing me from a 19-year-old kid off the plane in Mexico to the Rainmaker I am today. Thank you to the best of companies in NJPW, to the best of opponents I've been able to face here, and to the best of fans that have cheered and booed over the years. I promise to make it rain in every match I have left, so keep watching. Look, there is just no overstating this. This is a tremendous blow to New Japan and a massive shakeup to Japanese wrestling in general. I think it's safe to say, Karen, that the last roster move, which had a bigger impact on a Japanese company, would be the All Japan Exodus of 2000. That's obviously a much bigger story for different reasons. But the fact that no single move or departure from a Japanese company of this level has happened in more than 23 years says something. Having slept on this for a couple of nights, I have a few thoughts to add to kind of the laments and rending of garments, which seem to be making up much of the reaction in pro circles, as well as a couple of specific questions I'd like to get your takes on, Karen. But just off the top of your head, what was your immediate reaction to this news?
Well, as we've previously discussed, I wanted to proceed with tempered expectations, and I wanted to wait until something official was released by the company before throwing on the good old tinfoil hat and rolling out the conspiracy theory board. But hot dog, I was not prepared for this at all. I was literally relaxing on my couch, and I made the Animal Crossing joke, but I was playing Animal Crossing with a cup of tea, threw open Twitter just to check on, see if there are any updates for the show this weekend. And I nearly did a spit take when I saw the actual formal announcement. Seeing the press release literally in black and white on Twitter and New Japan's website felt so surreal to the point that I was ready to check the calendar and be like, this isn't April 1st. Did Evil go over to the editorial department again and harangue somebody into posting this? Like, what is going on? And it's one of those things for all my protests of not wanting to get my imagination running until I saw something official, seeing it become official felt like I was completely doused with cold water. Like I was just I couldn't sleep. I've had very little sleep in the last 2 days because I'm just my imagination is just running away with itself. And it's trying to reel it back in. It's one of those things where it's of course I'm excited. And, I want all the best for him. And I'm very excited to see where this conversation goes, because I feel like we're going to be talking about Okada a lot more than the Nagoya show. But you asked the importance of Nagoya. Okada's from Anjo, which is a city in Aichi Prefecture, and the capital is Nagoya. So that is his home prefecture. It's his home. He's the hometown boy. I don't know why this show wasn't more exciting, but it could be because typically on the New Beginning tour, Osaka and Sapporo tend to be the bigger of the shows in that series. Nagoya is that little the launching, the New Beginning, as it were, the launching point. But it's one of those things where I just don't know. I'm excited, but there's just still a little bit of tempered expectations they're starting now, because I am cautiously optimistic, but at the same time I can't say that I'm 100% this is amazing, because it is amazing, but I also am worried how New Japan is going to fare once Okada leaves, because we've talked in the past, he is such an integral part of the last how many years of their history, and it's I always make the joke, lol, Okada wins, lol, Okada wins. Well, it couldn't be to their detriment, because he's won so much. They haven't built up enough people.
Oh boy, yeah.
To take over.
Yes.
Or are they just gonna yank the band? Like, I mean, I saw a meme where they had like Okada leaving and then they like put the Tanahashi band-aid on, and I was like, that's the kind of unfair. But like, is the new generation? They're not the future generation. They're the now generation. Like now.
Yep. Yeah, no, there's a lot to be read into how they are going to be positioning, not just, the big four young guys currently in New Japan, but kind of everybody else, including people who were brought up a little bit before them, people who are still sort of kind of on the come up there, all manner of questions emerging out of that. Before I kind of get into my own takes here, there were a couple of things that I wanted to throw by you, specifically because of your time spent in Japan, your ability to kind of, read and understand Japanese and kind of have your finger a bit more on the pulse of the Japanese fan base than most of us who follow New Japan from North America. One of the things that I texted you about kind of as soon as this news was breaking was the sense that I was getting that, you alluded to the fact that those of us, who are terminally online, pro fans, the rumors were out there, right? And it certainly it didn't seem like it was a slam dunk thing, but it seemed like it was a real possibility, even heading into Wrestle Kingdom. I'm wondering if you can maybe talk a little bit as to why this might have come as more of a shock, I think, to your kind of just average, house show based Japanese New Japan fan who they are trying to kind of, bring out to whatever show when World Tag League comes through their smaller town or whatever it is. Why do you think there's been so much more shock, I think, to the Japanese audience than there is to the North American audience?
I don't think they were expecting a second coming of the Rainmaker shock in this particular instance, honestly. It's one of those things where in Japan, and they've talked about it in on commentary as well, is that like in Japan, when you work for a company, you tend to stay in a company for a very long time, if not your entire career. And Okada, came into the company at 19. He's 36 now. He's spent a significant portion of his life in this company. And, while they do have, your weekly pro wrestling magazine and your Tokyo Sports, where Japanese talent are always giving their, interviews and their raw comments that aren't necessarily as tailored as the ones that are on the websites, they're not as dialed into, I hate to say it, people with podcasts like us who, rant and ramble and talk about all our feelings, because they're more of they want to enjoy the moment. They want to enjoy the entertainment value. That's their version of the WWE, as it were. Like, they want to believe the kayfabe. They want to make it, it's real to them in that sense. And it's also, there's like that like a more of a guarded barrier between the talent and the family. The barricade is more like,
right.
like if you were going to go to a theater, the audience versus the stage, people from the audience at the theater aren't hopping on stage and joining into the play for the most part without getting in trouble. So it's one of those things where they're not as steeped into it as Western fans tend to be. While they do follow news outlets like Tokyo Sports, they prefer to live in the moment, and they don't. There are fans in Japan that do have YouTube channels and podcasts and stuff like that, but they don't play the guessing games like we do and the fantasy booking like we do until someone makes that official statement, or it comes out in the news that they have signed with X company or they're leading this company, or a press release is released from either the individual and or the company. And it's one of those things, like much like Tanahashi, Okada has always been viewed as a lifer in that company.
Right.
There are other people that have been like, well, I'm in New Japan for the rest of my life. This is where I'm going to retire. And then they end up leaving anyway. And that's fine. But Okada never, he may have offhandedly said here or there, yeah, I would love to be in WrestleMania, or I would love to wrestle X wrestler, what have you. And I feel now that the announcement's out there, not the hesitancy, but like the rush to get the Danielson match in and get other things in makes more sense.
Mm-hmm.
But with the comfort of Okada and Tanahashi always being there, that's why the fans were okay with Nakamura leaving, despite him being arguably one of their biggest talents in the modern era. I mean, there was a bit of heartbreak when Kushida left, but not to the extent of right. Shinsuke leaving and going to WWE. But I think that's why Shinsuke was comfortable leaving, because they had Okada. He gave chaos to Okada. He gave the company to Okada and said, I give you my mantle. Please do what you will. And, he left. Shinsuke left in 2016. It's been some time. And it's one of those things like, New Japan, since Shinsuke's departure, has started to be, has become a place where people who get released from WWE or AEW, they go to New Japan for a career renaissance. Take Kenta, for example, or Moxley, or Kingston coming and checking off things off of his bucket list. But it's always, no matter who came in since 2016 when Nakamura left, Okada was always there. He was always in the wings to hop into a title picture program, to win the G1, to win the New Japan Cup. He's always been there. And for the fans, that's like, we always made the joke that, putting Okada in a main event is the safe bet. It's the comfortable bet. But I can guarantee you, any venue in Japan, if Okada walks in, the moment, it's just like when Naito's music hits, you hear those coins drop, and the fans, it doesn't matter if he's on the first match of the night, which never is, or the last match of the night, the fans will lose their mind for Okada every single time. And for them, it didn't matter if he was heel or if he was face. Okada, from when he came back from Excursion, he came back as the Rainmaker. He always had this like almost otherworldly, untouchable quality to him, where other wrestlers in Hontai were doing meet and greets, and people in Chaos were doing meet and greets. But Okada was always like, kept away from the common folk, as it were. The Rainmaker and his Lamborghini don't mingle amongst the rest of us. So it was one of those things where that's always been like the goal for them, is always to revere Okada and treat him like he's something special, because he is someone special. And even in recent years, especially with the passing of Inoki, the way that he leaned into that and was like, I am the future of the company. I have been here. And it's one of those things, like, I could see that had Tanahashi not taken over for Obari last month, that it could have been Okada a few years from now, when Okada decided to transition out of in-ring competition. And who's to say that after wherever he goes for the next couple of years, when he's in his 40s and he's like, I don't want to do this anymore. And Tanahashi's like, I'm in my 50s. I'm ready to just go lay on a beach somewhere, or go hang out at a Japanese hot spring. Okada, it's your ball game. Here's the book. Like, just let me go. So it's one of those things where I feel like no matter where Okada goes in the world, should he ever choose to come back, they're going to be waiting to welcome him back with open arms. But it's, it's just one of those things, like I said before, while we may bemoan the comfortable and safe, reliable choice that is Okada, now the company needs to figure out, who Okada was without the belt. That was his journey. Now the company needs to find out who they are without Okada.
You've already talked about this a little bit there, but comparing this departure to Nakamura's, or kind of comparing the transition of power from Tanahashi over to Okada. I mean, we know that the whole the presentation and the story and the legend of Tanahashi is bringing us out of the dark days of Inokiism and everything like that, and drawing people back to New Japan. It's obviously still very early, but how do you think the Japanese fan base views the difference or distinguishes between either kind of the Tanahashi era and the Okada era, or Tanahashi as representative, as face of the company, versus Okada as face of the company, and what Okada means to the people in perhaps a different way than Tanahashi did?
It's one of those things where, when you have somebody like a Tanahashi who becomes the premier talent at a company, we all know, as much as we love our premier talent, at some point we need to think who's going to queue up next, who's going to be the one to not just dethrone them, but be able to handle the pressure and the expectations and be able to shoulder the company anytime the company needs them. Yes, Naito's been there. Yes, other people have been there, but no one has been consistently in Tanahashi's hot on his feet, surpassed him, been worked with him. When they had the superpowers handshake a few years ago, that was a big thing. Them tagging together as the Never Six-Man champions, that's a big thing. So it's one of those things where Okada will always be someone special to Japanese professional wrestling. Okada will be a name that they are going to remember for a very long time. Is there going to be an Okada-ism arc of New Japan at some point in time? Who knows? But I feel like fans, even though he's leaving, he will never leave the hearts of the Japanese people, because he's just too beloved by, and he's beloved abroad as well. But him attaining this status and bringing as many eyes to the product after the departure of many people like Omega and Ospreay and Jay White and the Bucks and everyone else, Okada's always been here. But now it's the people want to queue up to fight Okada. And that's the pride that they get to hold and be like, he's ours. He represents us. And I think that's what makes, like, that's why they hold him so dear, if that makes sense.
And that's really kind of, I think, the kind of the sense of kind of wounded grief that I'm seeing, on Discord channels and whatnot, from both North American fans who are just like diehard, New Japan is their ride or die company, as well. Yeah, and certainly from Okada's perspective, a friend of mine has been regularly pointing out, look, this is such a win-win situation for him. He gets to spend 5 years or whatever it might be, in whichever company he wants, and then at a moment's notice, moonwalks back into New Japan and is instantly there, positioned at the top to take on whoever happens to be at the top of the company at that point.
He's 36. 5 years from now, he'll be 41. You know who's 41? Naito, Ishimori. Like, he'll be fine. If he goes to wherever and doesn't like it, he can always go home. He can go into entertainment. He still has options.
A couple of my larger thoughts, and just to the whole question, of where he's going. Obviously, both, there's certainly no public word as to, which way he's leaning in terms of which of the major North American companies he might be joining. Your various reporters have their own theories and observations. As somebody who just purely subjectively enjoys AEW a lot more than WWE, I hope it's not wishful thinking on my part to believe that Tony Khan wasn't tweeting out that Marlo Stanfield gif unless he had things pretty much locked down, because otherwise that's going to age like, day-old milk. It is crazy. We've alluded to it here or there. It is crazy, Karen, to think that the AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura departure 8 years ago, and I remember where I was watching Wrestle Kingdom and a friend of mine checking his phone and going, oh my God, you'll never believe what's going on. It's crazy to think that just the total sheer power or sheer star power departing that company all at once, that could ever be eclipsed. But that's where we are with both Okada and Ospreay leaving at the same time. That's just a tremendous, tremendous power vacuum. In retrospect, if you think back to the New Japan shows that you and I did over the course of 2023, Karen, we talked a lot last year about how, okay, fine, Okada's 2023 had a lot of great matches. And yes, fine, he held the title for the first half of the year. But apart from that, what did he really do in 2023? He lost to Sonata when they wanted to pull the trigger on him. He elevated the Never Six-Man titles, and they teased the Kaito Kiyomiya feud, which never really materialized. And really seems like an opportunity that's been lost to the sands of time. I don't think, no matter where he goes, I don't think Tony Khan, if it is AEW, is going to be, allowing Kaito Kiyomiya, spending time with Okada, getting Kaito Kiyomiya over. Now, obviously, if we're kind of looking at this in retrospect, could Gato and the front office have predicted this departure? And again, I'm willing to say, sure, fine. It seemed unlikely, perhaps, right? Like we said, it's kind of unprecedented in terms of modern Japanese history. But if you do want to read the Obari departure as something of a, olive branch or a make good towards Okada, as some people have, you have to sort of say, okay, they had to be aware that this was a possibility that might happen. And I think this really puts the philosophical conflict between Gato and the front office that we've been hearing about over the past couple of years in terms of the speed with which younger talent is being elevated into a sharper light. And I think that's really the big question that New Japan is now facing. Not only have none of your four recently returned Young Lions no more, obviously none of them have beaten Okada in a singles match. None of them will have had, at least as of today, none of them will have had a singles match with Kazuchika Okada before he leaves. Master Wato did have one with him back in 2022, though. So don't worry, Wato totally got the Okada rub. If we're comparing this to Ospreay, right? Ospreay did have singles matches last year with Tsuji and Umino, both of which Ospreay won, but both of which, to varying degrees, were credited as real breakout performances that helped to establish those two guys. If you look back, cast your mind back, Karen, to 2022, when we had the Okada and Jonah program that was kind of being worked through the G1 with no clear guarantee whatsoever that Jonah would be sticking around the company in order to get the most out of that incredible G1 loss, which Okada gave to him. I'm not complaining about them doing that. I thought that was smart booking then. I think it's smart booking now. My point is that the company has shown that it is willing to and knows how to get the most out of booking Okada to lose. They just were not quick enough to the draw with their own guys, with their own, homegrown talent who, are theoretically the reins are being handed over to at some point, and who are theoretically sticking around a hell of a lot longer than Jonah was, and to whom you have much more regular access than Kiyomiya, right? Although that's kind of a bit of a push right now with the state of no, and the question as to whether or not he might be signed to New Japan in a couple of weeks.
Wouldn't be mad at it.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
When Okada comes back at 41, Kiyomiya will be in his mid-30s getting ready to go to WWE. So you know what? Have the match then.
Yeah. So I guess my point there is that, I think something like that shows that they were sort of taking Okada's presence for granted, right? And not actually, getting their work done of laying the foundations early on. Lastly, now, in terms of the discourse around this and people kind of, pressing the panic button in terms of what this means for New Japan. And I do think that a measured degree of panic is warranted here. Does New Japan's biggest homegrown star leaving the company while he is still very much positioned as the top guy, does that give me some concern as a fan of that promotion? Somebody who does still view it as having the highest benchmark for in-ring wrestling, and who, I agree with Chris Charlton and other people who've been sort of saying, no matter what, New Japan remains the greatest kind of field for gaining and demonstrating in-ring skills. Yeah, obviously, as somebody who loves and respects New Japan for those reasons, yeah, I'm concerned. Do I want New Japan or Japan in general, now with all of the WWE All Japan stuff happening or possibly happening, do I want Japan to become an effective developmental for the US market? Hell no. However, I will say this. As a pro wrestling fan, I want more opportunities, not just for dream matches and cross-promotional cards, but for wrestlers as workers whose ability to negotiate for better salaries and to wrest back some of their surplus value within a competitive marketplace. And if you have a range of employment opportunities where a combination of money, work-life balance, we know that the whole question of, Okada being able to possibly still being able to live in Japan, if he goes with AEW, the question of his wife's career in Japan, that's an issue. So things like that, creative fulfillment, and a whole host of other factors, which end up dictating where wrestlers work, rather than just, geography, where they're born, or rather than just an effective US monopoly, or rather than the almost, dare I say it, kind of almost feudal developmental system that, most of the Japanese companies still run. I take that amount of movability or that flexibility that somebody like Okada is willing to take advantage of. I take that as a net positive at a global sort of level. As much as I want, the New Japan and AEW partnership to work out well for both companies, people who are talking right now about how AEW shouldn't be in the market for Okada and are thus hurting their partner, they're ignoring the fact that, look, all that means is that, one, he just end up in the WWE making less money, as somebody like Nakamura and Styles did a few years ago before AEW was even a possibility. And that sort of collusion, right? Theoretically, AEW not offering a free agent a competitive salary or a competitive contract, that's the sort of, I'll call it collusion, right? Which kept so many wrestlers from being able to make as much money as they definitely deserved during the territorial days here in North America. And if you look at the history of that sort of collusion in other traditional sports, baseball or whatever it is, that's ugly, ugly stuff. So my point here is, yes, are there some downsides to this whole situation for New Japan? Definitely. Does it perhaps mean that, Japan's position within the global market might be weakened, or that, Japan is kind of the bulwark of professional wrestling might be being chipped away at? Yeah, possibly. But I do not think that is an excuse to either criticize Okada for taking the bag, or
Correct.
For AEW or WWE, whoever it ends up being, offering him the sort of money that a generational talent like his deserves. So that's my little rant there. I don't know if any of that crosses against anything you've been feeling or you've been thinking, Karen.
No, you and I are pretty much on the same page. I am all for people getting paid what they are worth. And I think, we've talked about it before with Okada, is that he, other than going for the King of Pro Wrestling Championship and the junior titles, he's done everything in New Japan.
Yep.
He's been
everything
there a long time.
I was just going to say everything except for getting the 4 younger guys over, which is
well,
again,
there's
that's an issue
also
we'll get into
too.
the actual comments.
but it's one of those things where there isn't much left for him to do. And I think as a lot of his peers that are in his age bracket, people that he's had 5-star classics with and like heated rivalries with, as more and more of them are showing signs of wear and tear or going for surgery or going away on medical for extended periods of time because their body just can't do it anymore. Okada, I think, is being smart in the sense that he's thinking about his physical health long term. If he wants to give back to the company when he's older, when he's in the New Japan dad stage, when he hits his 50s or whatever, or his 60s or whatever, he's thinking about, he's also a very tall guy. I love a good old 2-meter drop kick, but when you're 2 meters tall and you're doing all of that,
Miles landing up earlier. Yep.
Your joints, your back, and he's had, issues where, he's been taped up a lot for, different tournaments and stuff where it's like, I don't want to see the people I cheer for, the promotions I want. I always get worried when I see people taped up. Yes, I know that they're done with professionals. They know what they're doing, but it's just like, I'm just like, go lay on a beach for a couple of months. Go, people make jokes about Shinsuke surfing on his days off here in Florida, but you know what? If it means that he's able to have a long and healthy career or longer than he would expect it, because professional athletes, they can't go do it their entire lives. The ones that force themselves to go way too long, like Muto, it shows, and people don't enjoy it. Some people do, but a lot of people don't. And it's just one of those things where I have so many thoughts about where he could go out of. I'm gonna put 2.5 options out there because when I get to the third option, you'll be like, Karen, that's not an option.
Oh, I think I might know what it is, and it might not be as crazy as you're suggesting, but go ahead.
Well, we'll start with WWE. All right. So for me, like, when the announcement was made, the discussion of his free agency, came out with Sports Illustrated. Justin Barrasso, love his work. But usually when it gets covered by Justin Barrasso, there's always some, I don't know if there's like extra gravity added to the conversation or it feels more real because Sports Illustrated covers other professional sports besides wrestling.
Certainly, yeah.
But like, unlike Ospreay, who was signed to AEW while still under contract with New Japan, and it was made into this giant public spectacle with him showing up at a show well over a month prior to Wrestle Kingdom when they were still setting up his match for Wrestle Kingdom with his championship. Okada's announcement was so abrupt Thursday night that it sent shockwaves everywhere. And it was seeing the release of the press release in black and white with the logo that we all dread because it either means someone's injured or something terrible's happening. And to an extent, yeah, this is kind of terrible, but it's also kind of wonderful because I hate to say it, if New Japan can't afford to keep Okada, then he needs to go somewhere where he can get paid what he's worth. It was the same conversation I made about Mercedes Moné. If they could not afford to keep her, if someone else is willing to pay her what she's worth, and the same thing about any other talent, go get that bag, go make that money. I don't pay Okada's bills. I don't support his family. I can't decide as a fan what's best for him to do. So if this is what he chooses, that's his choice. If he doesn't like it, finishes his contract, leaves. It's fine. But again, like I was saying before, if he was going to AEW, I feel like there would be, even on commentary, there'd be the conversation like he'll still work limited New Japan dates, like they do with Ospreay or Moxley or Kingston. Like it wouldn't feel so final. But the fact that they had to scramble and be very clear that once February hits, he is only working 3 days to finish up the 3 tour stops in Osaka and the 2 in Sapporo, to the point where they moved the never open weight championship match from Osaka to his final match in Korakuen Hall, which is traditionally the place New Japan sends, other than New Beginning or the Tokyo Dome, that is where they send somebody off when they are leaving the company. It is the mecca of combat sports in Tokyo. That is their Madison Square Garden. That is the place where stuff goes down. So, and then changing the Osaka match to, of all matches, a singles match against Tanahashi in the arena, in the Osaka Eddie Arena where the Rainmaker shock happened. It feels very final. It feels like they are getting every last drip out of that Okada orange. They're just squeezing every last bit out to make sure that the fans in Tokyo are happy, the fans in Sapporo are happy, the fans in Nagoya, well, he's the hometown boy. They're going to love him regardless. It doesn't really matter. But in Osaka, we know how Osaka can be about everything. So then I think, well, what does, like, pros and cons real quick, what does WWE have to offer Okada? Consistently shorter matches. Yes, if he is in a pay-per-view program, he'll have longer matches. But for the most part, he's not expected to have a 5-star classic every Monday night or every Friday night. He can have lighter matches. He can make an arguably obscene amount of money with merch. Unfortunately, it won't be very good design merch like it was in New Japan, but that's neither here nor there. But if WWE, they've been known to hand out very big contracts for very big people. If they're offering him what Nakamura makes now without going to NXT, just straight to main, why not? Reuniting with Shinsuke, they're buddies. They could go surfing together in Florida. It's fine. But like I said before, I don't pay their bills. If that's what he wants and that's enough to take care of his family. Yeah, his wife is a famous voice actress, but thanks to the internet, she can work remotely if she wants to, or she can hop a plane, or, he could always become a house husband, whatever, it's fine. But the cons, of course, are with WWE, if they're, depending on how they're doing the roadshow programs, he could be on the road more. He's only going to be home 2 days a week. Again, potentially bad t-shirt designs. There is a heavy reliance on spoken promos, but yeah. I think with Triple H now remembering what it was like with Nakamura and Asuka and other Japanese talent in NXT, they're giving non-native speakers of English the ability to speak in their native language, either with, video packages with subtitles or, a native English speaking mouthpiece that they can work off of and bounce things off of. But Okada also speaks a fair bit of English, and people don't give him enough credit for that. Yes, he doesn't speak it very often, but again, if you're in front of 20,000 people and you don't want to speak, you're not speaking in your native language, anyone who can do that, I have respect for. I said the same thing about Ospreay and Zack Sabre Jr. when they speak in Japanese, when Thomas speaks in Japanese. If you're trying, that's more than enough. And I wish more Western fans would understand that, because they're not the ones in that ring with that live mic on live TV as what chants are going down. So, what other ideas? Yes, there has been some inconsistency with their presentation of Japanese talent. I'm not going to forget the Hideo Itami days. I'm not going to forget Kushida or Sarai or Ike Manjiro. Yes, we do have
or Portozawa still toiling away in the
he's doing his
lines.
Best. That's all I can say. But you have Asuka, you have Kairi, you have Io, you have Nakamura, who are now getting more consistent spotlight, programs of interest, rivalries, and, Okada trademarking Rainmaker and probably also putting in eventually to trademark his name means if he were to go to WWE like Shinsuke, he would not need to change his name. Mm-hmm. Like Okada or Asuka had to change her name. Kenta had to change his name. Io even had to change the spelling of her name. And Ike Manjiro can't use Ike Manjiro anymore because he's now WWE copyrighted. So he's had to use a different name. So talking about Nakamura leaving. So when Nakamura signed with WWE, it was announced January 27th in Tokyo via press conference. His final match with New Japan was January 1st or 30th, 2016 at the Road to New Beginning in Korakuen Hall. My tinfoil hat's going on, guys. It was Chaos, which was a Nakamura, Okada, and Ishii versus Tanahashi, Shibata, in Goto. Nakamura was 36. 36 is the magic number here when he went to WWE, and he'll be 44 next month. So when Nakamura left, he was confident the company was in good hands because he had Tanahashi there, he had Okada there, and I think it was more about same thing with Okada possibly leaving. It was a self-awareness about his physical condition, what he wanted to do for his family, goals he had as a wrestler, and the limitations that are going to become apparent as you age in a sport that is this demanding. And later in 2016, Nakamura debuted at NXT TakeOver WrestleMania weekend, which would be coming up in April. Okada has the slight advantage with the experience of working ROH more often, working in AEW, working in New Japan of America, where he's had more exposure consistently in front of a foreign audience. I was listening to Wei and Neil discuss what about the casual fans and how they would react to Okada, and I got an answer. So in January 25th, 2016, watching the Royal Rumble for the first time in a very long time. The buzzer counts down to entrant number 3, and AJ Styles walks in. At the time, I only watched WWE. I had no idea who the phenomenal one was. And watching the crowd lose their mind and AJ Styles just sauntering out, I love that.
Well, after they cut back away from Roman, but yeah.
Yeah, well, but that was the thing, is that it was this whole thing. Like, they're talking about the highest free agent. They mentioned the IWGP Championship. I'm like, IWGP Championship? What's that? And it was one of those things where, I'm not going to, I felt extreme FOMO back then, because I had heard about Finn being in New Japan. I had heard about Shinsuke being in New Japan, but it didn't feel real to me because I didn't know how to access it at the time. And, back then, January 2016, when that Rumble happened, it was 5 days before the end of January, where his contract would have technically ended. Next weekend is the Royal Rumble in Tampa. There are no shows scheduled for New Japan between January 25th and February 1st. And Okada's only remaining dates are in February. So I'm here like, we may be, I don't want to get excited about it, but I can still remember how I feel when AJ made his entrance at the Rumble. If they're able to have that, I don't care who you are. If you're dialed into enough wrestling, you will know what that sound means.
And
you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And even if you are, the hypothetical casual fan who has no idea who Kazuchika Okada is and whatnot, I feel like the WWE product, and specifically the audience, are in such tune and harmony with one another right now. Like, you look at the degree to which, not to get on a whole other issue here, but the degree to which, to my mind, a lot of, let's just say, not great in-ring acts are still getting reactions on NXT and things like that. The audience is totally willing to play ball. And if you do, anything that's a modicum of what they gave to AJ and just say, this guy is the greatest wrestler in Japan. He is a huge deal. He has headlined the Tokyo Dome X times, blah, 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 blah. If you do that and have whoever it is that he is immediately booked with or programmed with, it was Neil, I can't remember if it was Neil or Way was suggesting Walter or whoever it might be.
Let's go.
Like, if you do that, the crowd will react. The crowd will get on board. I think people really kind of overstate this, the idea that, like, the hypothetical casual fan is just going to, like, lose their mind if a wrestler that they have not seen before ever comes up. And it's like, look, how were wrestlers introduced to the WWE for the past 40 years? It's not rocket science here. So yeah, no, I definitely would not be worried about their ability to bring him in and get him slotted into whatever spot and whatever program they would want him to be if he does go there.
Well,
okay.
And the other thing
what about AEW?
real quick, but also to follow that was, give him a monster run like Asuka. He doesn't need to be thrown into a title program right away, but just have him start running through everyone and everything. Make people who don't know who he is learn who he is. So AEW, he's obviously familiar with the show format. He's worked with a lot of wrestlers, Omega, the Bucks, Rocky, Chaos, Shibata, Blackpool Combat Club. Potentially like a lighter weekly travel schedule, competitive salary to WWE, be able to continue working programs or continue working with New Japan like Moxley, Kingston, etc. Flexible travel schedule without having to relocate. But I feel like if they're going to go through all the trouble of signing him, they would want to put him on TV, especially after the loss of Punk and Omega being out on medical. They're going to want to push him. Unfortunately, that might be the detriment to other talent. Cons, very packed, stacked upper tier. You have MJF, you have Hangman, you have Swerve, you got Danielson, Mox, a whole bunch. I don't follow AEW as closely as other people do, but I am aware that there is a very large pool of very talented people that are not getting title shots.
And with Ospreay coming in right at the same time as well. That's a tremendous influx of just guys at the top that are going to block somebody else's push. Yes.
Well, and that was the thing, is that, his arrival this shortly after Ospreay starting in March, could eclipse Ospreay spent the last 8 years clawing his way out from Okada. You don't want to bring Okada right back. You don't want Okada chasing him into AEW. because then you've just undone what they just did like a week ago at Battle in the Valley. Like they need, the two of them need time apart.
Yes.
Honestly, to wrestle other people, to go explore the world, whatever. It could conversely impact AEW's relationship with partner companies like DDT and Tokyo Joshi Pro, who regularly send their talent to America, including Takeshita leaving DDT to go to AEW. And he's another name that should be in that title picture that isn't. I'm still waiting on to figure out what the end game or the dividends are going to be for Jay White in AEW. Yeah. I figured at some point he would be near the title picture, not just in a tournament for potentially a title shot of some kind. And they've also signed away a lot of talents like Juice, Best Friends, Aussie Open. It's one of those things where that alone in the last year and a half, AEW has significantly benefited over New Japan. Yes, he's leaving New Japan, but I feel like in his heart, he still has a modicum of loyalty and respect for the company. Not that going to AEW would be a disrespectful move, but I think he's also very aware of what's the state of New Japan right now as to what it was before AEW came around, before their relationship like built together, and where it could be going in the future. And again, there still hasn't been any mention of Okada being still able to work New Japan on commentary. And for me, that's a very big sticking point, because I feel like if they wanted to put the fans' hearts at ease about where he was signing, it would have been in the conversation, as it's been in the conversation for Ospreay the last 2.5 months.
See, I'm wondering. I've just been presuming, and you're talking about, the booking of him at Cork and things like that. I think they just don't know. I think it's literally, like Okada has hired, this big sports agent and everything like that, and they're playing this in exactly the sort of way that a major free agent in a traditional sport would. And the various stakeholders, the various bidders or whatever it is, they don't know until the actual day of, right? Where he is actually going to sign, right? So they can't promise more than they can actually deliver in that regard. So that's sort of why I'm still sort of viewing this as not necessarily a coin flip per se, but just sort of, we're all in a position, I think, of relatively equal ignorance at this point with regards to that.
And my last one is, what if Okada bought TNA? Not that he's going to TNA. He's like, I will get the ultimate force of revenge. I will not just go there. I will buy it. It is mine. It is going to be Okada Rainmaker Wrestling.
It would, I mean, like, look, like it's I know it's not going to be, or whatever it might be, but like, no, of course not. But like, they don't have the money. They couldn't have the money for Ospreay. They definitely don't have the money for Okada. It's just, like, there are matches to be made there, like, and certainly, to that point, I will say, just as a little, rejoinder, to Wei, who I think was sort of saying, like, look, he was sort of saying that, the WWE has more fresh matches or whatever it might be, or more interesting matches. I agree with that. There are more combinations there that have not been tested out. I just, as somebody who doesn't really enjoy the WWE television product, I'm sort of looking at that as a, like, yes, I could start cooking all of my meals with toothpaste. That would be fresh. That would be different. That would be new. But I don't want those things combined with one another. I don't want those things, combining together, right? And certainly, if, as I think we'll be talking about at a number of points in the actual review of Nagoya, which we are getting to for Cafe patrons momentarily, if one of the big problems here is the lack of, kind of foundation building that Okada did with those younger guys, the possibility of him going to AEW and being able to come over for your sort of one-off matches against a Tsuji, against an Umino, and almost kind of doing, kind of almost in the position that somebody like John Cena is in right now in the WWE. There's real value to that for both sides, I would say.
Oh, I absolutely agree. If Okada takes a page out of Kairi's freelance book and was able to, give back to the company, or, stroll into a New Japan Strong on occasionally with TNA, it's the same thing. He could still work New Japan because they work together on different things. Like when, they collaborated for the Multiverse United series, they've sent talent over there. Kushida and Kevin Knight are over there right now. They have probably, of the three, arguably the most flexible schedule. They have like one pay-per-view every month. The next day it's ROH format, TV taping, or 2 days of TV tapings. And then they are free to work wherever else they feel like it, which could even give them flexibility to work elsewhere. while they are on broadcast TV, it's probably a far smaller scope of broadcast availability compared to, you know, AEW and WWE's broadcast presence, both on air and internationally via the internet. Budgetary constraints, as I said, if they can't afford Ospreay, and I doubt he would want to make less than Nick Nemeth. The show attendance is considerably smaller compared to what you would have at a WWE, AEW, or a Tokyo Dome. You know, he's used to working arenas that have like 2,000 to 40,000 people. I don't know if he'd want to go to a much smaller venue that might have 1,000 on a good day. You know what I'm saying? And then there's also, it's the same thing that he might have with AEW as well, is that there's the expectation that Okada would need to keep performing at his New Japan level.
Yes.
With a much smaller roster that it either doesn't have the experience of working in Japan or may not necessarily want to work that style, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so no, I think that's kind of also the trade-off between AEW and WWE, right? Like, yeah, fine, you know, you're not on the road with AEW. Yeah, fine, you're flying in for television once every week or second week. But when you're there, there's a certain level, you know, you're not just going to be able to do the Tennessee two-step and tag out and whatever it is and just sort of, you know, work your way
or just have a vignette and enjoy nice catering every now and then. And I feel like that's, again, if it's more of him looking towards the future and his physical health, or be able to have a longer career, like if he's anticipating wrestling well into his 40s, I feel like of the three, the WWE option, while it may not be everyone's favorite option, is probably the most easy on the body, as it were. It's probably the least physically demanding. With TNA, it's probably a close second.
But again, I think this all to kind of, you know, begin to kind of wind the Okada section down here. I think this sort of points to the fact that, look, trying to sort of point to or predict which way this is going to go depends upon us having a degree of knowledge of his own motivations and of his own priorities, which just, you know, none of us have. Nobody does except for him and his family, right? And it's kind of foolish for us to presume that we do, you know. Again, if, you know, to compare him perhaps to somebody like Danielson, right? Who in leaving the WWE wanted the heavier work schedule, wanted the bigger matches. And when AEW wasn't even giving him enough, okay, fine, bring me over to Japan. Let me work the G1. I'm just, you know, I need to keep doing this and whatnot. And that's, you know, the path that he's been taking in his twilight years. So as of right now, still no clue as to which way Okada's decision will fall. But like we've been saying, you know, for God, nearly an hour now at this point, just a massive landmark event within the history of Japanese wrestling, certainly within the history of New Japan, and possibly very, very much a real landmark event in North American wrestling as well. Okay, Karen, all of that said, we do still have a New Beginning show to review here. So you're ready to kind of turn the page and dig into some matches coming from the Aichi Prefectural Gymnasium in